The ancient ruins of Palmyra, reminders of a time when Syria was the crossroads of a continent, when kings and caravans would pass through Palmyra on their way to and from the east. Today, parts of Syria still live in that past. They live it and they dream of it. When there was a bigger, greater Syria, and when Syria was the soul and the pride of the Arab world. Syria is no longer the power it once was. It's been beaten in wars. Some of its Arab neighbors are enemies, but now Syria is trying to regain its position of prominence. Modern Syria is alive with its history as a crossroad. It's a mix of traditional and modern, Muslim and Christian, peasant and urban, all descendants of the travelers or merchants who came and stayed. It's a new Syria. The days of gold and jewels and perfumes may be over, but now a new commodity must pass through Syria: political power. It's the statesmen and the politicians who now come to Damascus with settlements stuffed in their pockets, settlements that get rewritten and reshaped by their stopover. Syria sees itself at the center of the Mideast. It sees itself as the heart or conscience of the Arab world, the keeper of Arab nationalism, the leader in the fight against Israel. And from the number of big politicians that have been coming through here, they don't seem to be alone in that assessment. The leader they all come to see is in this limousine. He's returning after months of illness, and his welcome was spectacular. To the Syrians, Hafez Assad is no ordinary hero. Despite his illness, despite a devastating defeat by the Israelis in Lebanon, despite U.S. efforts to sidestep him, he has turned events around in his favor. These supporters chant, "With our blood and with our soul, we will sacrifice ourselves for you, Hafez Assad." In the 13 years since he seized power, he has achieved an indispensable role for Syria in the Mideast. Now, U.S. envoy Donald Rumsfeld comes to Syria. Saudi, Moroccan, and French mediators all come to get Assad's approval. Night and day, the limousines pull up, bringing diplomats just learning about a new force. In any Mideast education, Syria has become one of the first stops.
The fact that I've been able to include Damascus in my first Middle East visit is a sign of the high importance that we attach to the views and policies of the Syrian government.
They try to persuade, to pressure, to mollify, but more often than not, they come away frustrated that Syria goes its own way.
Our policy has its own admirers and followers in the Arab world, from Morocco to the Gulf states.
Are you the leader in the Arab world today?
Well, we don't want to claim that, but as a matter of fact, Syria now is taking a leading role, and it is now on the first steps of this role.
The Americans tried to get them out, avoid them in Lebanon. Now they are back to Damascus. All the Americans are back to Damascus.
But why?
They are in the pivot of the Arab policy. Syria is the heart of the Arab nation. You cannot avoid Syria when you have to deal in the Middle East. You just can't avoid Syria. Be it Syria of Hafez al Assad or be it Syria of anybody. Syria is at the center of Arab policy.
Much of its importance is geographical. For example, to the south, the Syrians face the Israelis on the Golan Heights. It shares borders with Jordan and Iraq, and to the west is Lebanon, a country on the verge of being swallowed up by Syria. Since 1976, at the invitation of the Lebanese, Syria has controlled a large section of Lebanon. Now, with the help of its Lebanese allies, that area grows daily. Much of Lebanon is now a kind of extended Syria, under its control, guarded by its army. This is Lebanon, but these soldiers are Syrian. There are more than 15 such checkpoints one has to pass through to drive from Beirut to Damascus. Syrian arms go through here. So do army transports carrying men from one position to another. This checkpoint is at the entrance to Deir Shwire. It's a Christian village in central Lebanon. Like most of the towns overlooking Beirut, Syrian soldiers are everywhere. They live here and walk around as if the town is theirs rather than Lebanese. Deir Shwire has a special importance. It's less than 2 kilometers from Bekfaya, the home of the Gemayels. From Deir Shwire, you can look down at the streets around the president's personal headquarters. You can easily pick a target. The Syrians are that close. Usually, they don't allow pictures here. A U.S. sound man was kidnapped 2 days before we arrived, but we could come and go safely because we were with these men, Lebanese, from Deir Shwire, who'd like to be part of Syria.
Being Lebanese, we think that there are national, geographic, historic relations between Lebanon and Syria, being brothers.
What's the Syrian goal in the end? What is your goal in the end? To be one again?
Not by force, but by consent and by gradual development. We like to be one, but until then, we respect and defend the independence of Lebanon, and we think that our Syrian brothers support us in this defense.
We and the Lebanese are one nation.
One nation. What that means to Syrian Minister Farouk Shara is time on Syria's side. Unlike the Israelis, they're in no rush to leave.
Because we are not foreigners in Lebanon. We can stay so many years. I mean, but the Americans are foreigners, the French are foreigners, the Israelis are foreigners. They are staying in a hostile climate, atmosphere there. We are in our brother's land.
That kind of unity works 2 ways. While the Syrians stay in Lebanon, a number of factions opposed to the Lebanese government are now waging their campaigns out of Damascus. They're against Gemayel's dealings with the Israelis, and they're all working out of Damascus to get their message across. Damascus has become the center for the hardliners. Libyan Minister Abdul Jaloud calls it the Hanoi of the Mideast. Recently, he met with leaders of the rebel PLO faction now headquartered here. They include Abu Musa, who defeated Arafat in Tripoli. Now that they control the Palestinian forces in the region, this coalition is once again turning to the Israelis and to what they call the crusading forces.
The year 84 will be a year of volcano. It will be a year of destruction to the so-called crusader forces or the multinational forces. A year of destruction.
Damascus is not discouraging that kind of rhetoric, and militarily at least has been actively backing the factions that are pushing to unseat President Gemayel. That's one of the reasons Druze leader Walid Jumblatt now works out of here, rather than from his home in Lebanon. When he's interviewed, typically with a glass of brandy, he repeats how much he hates the Gemayels.
Never will accept the rule of this damn family and the Phalangist party. Never. Whatever the price is and whatever the consequences are.
That's what you feel. Do you think that Syria really will help you do that? Get rid of them?
That's the Syrian problem. That's not my problem.
But you'd like their assistance.
If they can provide it, why not? If they don't want, for some reason, it will not change my will. Never.
Have they given you any indication that they would help?
Ask them.
I'm asking you.
Ask them.
From your point of view, have you felt that they've given you some...
Until now, the relation is excellent, and it will stay like that.
That excellent relation is largely based upon military support. tanks, arms, and rockets that the Syrians got from the Soviets and are now selling or giving to the Druze. Last week, on one day, some 400 tons of ammunition were reportedly trucked to the Druze front lines. This was just an exercise, but in Lebanon, the targets are real. The man who did a lot to build that army is General Slas, Syria's Minister of Defense. He loves movie stars and glamour. He loves beautiful objects. And he's an avid collector of guns. His private library at home includes gifts from Lebanese ex-President Frangieh, Fidel Castro, and various mementos from the Israelis that were not gifts. His concern in Lebanon is not Gemayel, but Israel, and getting Lebanon firmly back in the Arab fold.
ما بيهم أمير جميل موجود ولا غيره، يعني إحنا ممكن نتعايش مع أي رئيس جمهورية بيجي لبناني، لأنه بالأساس إذا كان أمير جميل بده يكون مع الشعب اللبناني بده يكون هو حر، ما بيكون تحت إرادة إسرائيل ورهن إرادة إسرائيل. لكن إذا كان بقي أمير جميل تحت إرادة إسرائيل لا يمكن أن يستمر بحكم الشعب اللبناني، لأنه كل الشعب اللبناني بيكره الاحتلال الإسرائيلي.
Today, the main rallying point of the Syrians is its army. President Assad and General Slas on his right have made the threat of war the catalyst that keeps the country together. And the army is everywhere, in the streets throughout the city. Convoys and transports drive through every intersection in Damascus. Army barracks are tucked away in downtown military camps, and no filming is allowed. As long as the threat of war exists, as long as the people support the army, Syria will persevere. And that pledge of support has to come from every segment of the country. These women are on their way to a workers' meeting. The Ba'ath Party, like the government headed by President Assad, will run the meeting and organize the speeches. This is where socialism begins its reach downward, down to the level of the people. The government of President Assad isn't a structure or a force, if you will, imposed on a country. It's also a network of influences that are spread throughout every aspect of society here. Factory production, wages, food prices, agriculture, education. Every element of society is somehow linked to the Ba'ath Party. And it's that kind of influence that not only manages a country, it also watches and controls it. Today's meeting is special. Syria's Minister of Labor, on your left, has arrived to give out the Heroes of Production Awards and to address the workers. This kind of meeting takes place twice a year in every factory, in every business throughout the country. Mahmoud Kadur talks about the Zionist capitalist threat. He talks about the sacrifices workers must make to keep Syria strong against its enemies. War, politics, and production are all mixed together in a message of nationalism that goes on for more than 2 hours. At the end, the awards are handed out, ironically radios and pens from so-called Western capitalistic countries. The winners, those who served their state best. Production, not wages, is the concern of the party-run unions. The average workers here make some 700 Syrian pounds a month, equal to about $130. If they produce more, they can earn more, but there's rarely any overtime. They have to do the work within the 8-hour day. That's what socialism is. You work for the state, not yourself. That lesson is taught very early. These are the young vanguards who were schooled daily in a kind of Syrian catechism. The people work for the state, they are told. The state is for the people, and the workers and peasants all benefit. Workers and peasants, and they really are called that, are the cornerstone of the Syrian state. This field is near Beda, a village about an hour's drive north of Damascus. In many ways, the people live in a different era here than the workers in the cities, but they are still attached to the government's arm of control, the Ba'ath Party. Every village has a cooperative of farmers. And like the workers, they must listen to speeches on politics. This is being held in the local schoolyard, so the farmers obediently sit at their desks and listen. They too were told that they must make sacrifices. And when they ask for more tractors or a new meeting hall, the requests are duly recorded by the secretary in the minutes, but later they are told, no, they must wait until the threat of war is over. When the vote is taken, they all agree with the party, and a democratic decision is taken. One of the few places where politics does not dominate a gathering is inside the mosque. Syria's socialism is secular. And in contrast to Iran and other countries, it's not tied to the Muslim worship. Religion is encouraged so long as it stays out of politics. And today it does. People in Syria seem to accept the state in its role. They've had 13 years of stability under President Assad. They are not actively at war like Iran and Iraq, and they are comfortable with their lives. Most simply hope for a life where they can die in peace.
Syria, very good country. Too many farms, too many trees, too many, and good people.
The Syrian people are good. They're generous, and unlike some Mideast countries, they welcome Western visitors.
This was slaughtered especially for you, for your coming.
One man gave me his worry beads that he had carried for more than 20 years. Take them to Canada, he said, as my friend. The food had taken all day to prepare. 2 sheep had been killed in our honor and then boiled whole. We were the guests of what's called the Hafle, the traditional feast. And the mood of that meal completely contradicted the Western image of Syrians as surly and serious. They loved to celebrate with guests, possibly because a lot of the rest of their lives is anything but happy. Every day, 6 days a week, at 9:30 or so, government workers begin arriving. Syria is first and foremost a socialist country, with all the bureaucracy and government buildings one imagines with it. People have jobs here, but go into any government building, and half the people are sitting around doing nothing. They're just waiting for 2 o'clock to come around so they can go home. Many work only 4 hours a day. They're simply not motivated. It's a job that pays less than $200 a month. For that money, food is not a problem. Prices are kept low through government regulation of most basic products. And every corner shopkeeper has plenty to sell. He's also got lots of buyers for his typically fresh goods. If someone can afford a little more, a butcher will give you a slightly better cut than the government allows. But there are no lines, no shortages, and most Syrians, even the poorest, seem to have plenty to feed their families. Syria boasts that it has no real poverty, and from all we saw, they were right. The problems they do face are often familiar. Mrs. El Husseini's husband is a lawyer and they're middle class. Their children average about 4 hours of television a night, Western TV in fact, and naturally it's sandwiched in between phone calls and homework. But they all live in a small apartment that's a fourth-floor walk-up, and their mother has to work to supplement her husband's income.
We need more money for living more better, you see, because the family want many things, you see, and we need more things for the children, for the kids, for the house, for everything, see. For that, I need job. The job of my husband not enough.
But the economy is not what they want to talk about to a foreign visitor invited for coffee. Nouri al-Husseini and his family all worry that Syria is not properly understood by the West.
1983 must nominated by the year of Syria.
They're proud of their president, their schools, and during the mandatory suites, he tried to explain.
That Syria, about 7 or 8 millions, and she hasn't only little capacities of oil and metals. You have to know, as a conclusion, that the national enthusiasm is the background of the Syrian struggle, and the enthusiasm only.
What about, though, within Syria? I mean, you've got the army everywhere now.
What does it mean for you?
What does it mean for you?
Oh, it doesn't mean for you. We are ready for, always we have to be ready. You know, the American ships in the sea, the Israeli forces in Al-Julan and in Lebanon. So, and we are alone. You know that we are alone. We have to fight.
That feeling of standing alone is nurtured through government censorship. These are the editors of Syria's nightly newscast. The senior editor, Diab Suleiman, is making sure that all the copy conforms to government standards. On this particular night, a reference to Jordan's King Hussein had to be changed. By the time the newscast is finally read, that same copy will have been approved by 2 other government officials, including a minister. Once again, it's a matter of controlling people, politics, and information. And it not only affects the news that is heard within Syria, it also relates to news being sent abroad. This is the feed point for all foreigners. Adel Mashras is the man in charge. He checks all material, looks through the tapes as they arrive from Beirut or Damascus, and ultimately acts as the censor.
Hello, this is CBS Damascus.
In December, for example, no pictures or interviews of Yasser Arafat were allowed to be transmitted via satellite. At other times, military materials have been cut out of items. Mashras is himself a journalist who takes great pride in doing his best. As a result, he feels uncomfortable with his job. Do you like your job?
You are journalists, I think, and you know that it is a little bit hard job and difficult one. I like it when I'm at home, but when I'm here, I don't like it.
News censorship also extends to news coming into Syria. For example, the Time magazine that appeared in late January on the newsstands had 2 pages torn out. Pages 15 and 16 were missing. During that same period, the Associated Press news service was cut. AP claimed it was because it ran news about Iraq. The government said it was due to a technicality. But the worst example occurred while we were filming. Meet Hamadi, our government escort. He was almost always with us, at meetings, interviews,
Let's take our camera to go.
And when other officials preferred that we didn't film, he politely led us away. But once we did film, and it was without Hamadi. The example was in this village, because the late afternoon light was so beautiful. Hamadi had driven ahead. We tried to stop him, but he hadn't heard us. And when he finally found us, and all we had filmed were these children, his reaction was ominous. He was unaware our camera was rolling.
You must not take any picture if I am not with you. I'm not with you.
But you can't do anything to our driver.
I will put him in jail tomorrow.
What do you mean you'll put him?
Right,
No, you won't. Come on now, come on.
Because I told him from the very beginning not to stop anywhere if I am not with him. And
Okay.
I told him from the very beginning.
Okay, well,
and he knows it.
All right, well, we'll get in the car, but I'm sorry about that. I think you're just upset.
You could have at least, he could have at least driven a little quickly, and he could get
Okay, we'll get in the car now.
And you said from the very beginning, it's finished when we're going to the
But you're
market.
not going to do something to
I
him.
will, to that man only, not to you.
No, you won't.
You are a foreigner, I can't do anything to you.
Is that?
This is, I mean, for me, this is a very funny story. If you take it seriously, it's funny, really.
I don't think our driver thought it was particularly funny.
It is a funny story, believe me. I advise you not to take it seriously, because this does not reflect a shred of truth. In reality, it does not reflect anything.
Our driver did not go to jail, but he was afraid that he might. And after the threats, he made sure that we were always accompanied by Hamati wherever we filmed. Threats like that are chilling, and they aren't arbitrary. Too many times they've been carried through with, and they keep people very effectively in check. Syria isn't like a Poland or a Chile, where you see police with clubs and tear gas attacking demonstrators. Here, people don't protest against the government. They demonstrate for it, because like our driver, a lot have learned the consequences of doing anything else. The lessons Syrians remember took place in Hama, a city north of Damascus. 2 years ago, half the city was destroyed by government troops. Even now, no pictures are allowed of the rubble that hasn't been cleared away or reconstructed. Thousands died behind these walls, but today, all opposition there is quiet, and President Assad's poster once again hangs in the city.
أيها الأحبة المواطنون.
Now, the president is looking to be tough to the opposition outside his country. In his last speech a month ago, he talked of the Israelis and of the Arab countries who cooperate with the enemy. He has seen his tough rule work at home, and now he is turning those same policies outward. He may not want Lebanon as his right now, but the realization of a dream may be too great a chance to resist. Greater Syria. For Assad, it's simply a question of now or later. For the Journal, this is Ann Medina in Damascus.